So I'll start with TDIU. TDIU stands for Total Disability Due to Individual Unemployability. And so I'm going to refer to that as either TDIU or IU. And ultimately, for anyone who's not familiar with the term, it is when you, as the veteran, are able to be paid at the 100% rate, even though your combined individual disabilities are not or do not total a 100% scheduler. So ultimately, it is when the VA looks at either an individual service connected disability or the combination of your all of your service connected disabilities or even just some of them and determines that those disabilities and the limitations that they cause for you result in an inability to perform substantial gainful employment. When you are filing for unemployability, technically, the way that the VA interprets or should interpret unemployability is that it runs with any of your service connected claims. So ultimately, the VA is to assume that you are always applying for the highest rating that you can receive for your disabilities that you have claimed or that are on appeal. So ultimately, if there is evidence in the file that shows that you are unemployable, the VA is supposed to address a claim for TDIU as well as your other individual claims. Now, oftentimes the VA doesn't do that unless you file the technical form for filing for unemployability, and that is the VA form 8940. So when you file that form, what you are looking for is to identify any or all service-connected disabilities that you believe result in an inability for you to perform work. So a little bit of a caveat there is what the VA has been doing with these forms ultimately when the veteran lists those service-connected disabilities, the VA goes and schedules exams to evaluate all, if not most, of those disabilities. And so, what you're going to want to do is I think, limit a little bit as far as which disabilities you are claiming, in that if some of them are not causing limitations that you necessarily think are resulting in an inability to work, you may want to leave those off so that the VA doesn't go in and reevaluate those, because ultimately, as I'll talk about later on, that can result in the VA proposing to reduce if, for whatever reason, that examination comes back with findings showing that you might be the severity of your condition might have improved. So anyway, what you want to do on that form is list your service-connected disabilities. You want to limit it to your service-connected disabilities or disabilities that you are currently claiming or have on appeal that you believe will ultimately be determined to be service connected. You don't want to list non-service connected disabilities, because that's one of the reasons that the VA will deny unemployability, is they will determine that yes, you aren't able to perform substantially gainful employment, but that some non-service connected disabilities are causing that unemployability and that it's not completely due to service connected disabilities. So that's one tip, is to make sure you're only identifying service connected disabilities or those that you believe will be service connected, and then limiting it to those disabilities that you understand may be reevaluated after the VA receives your 8940. One of the other tips as far as filing for unemployability and providing the VA with the evidence that they are going to be looking for that will help you to win on your claim is that if you have been determined disabled by the Social Security Administration, you will want to make sure that that information is contained in your filing. And ultimately, if you are able to, if you have access to those records or your favorable Social Security determination, you may want to provide that to the VA. Now, again, going back to what I just was talking about as far as service connected versus non-service connected, If your Social Security disability was granted based on all non-service connected disabilities, that determination probably isn't going to help you much as far as proving your unemployability. You're going to need different information related to your service connected conditions. But if you were granted Social Security disability benefits as a result of service connected disabilities, then that information can be helpful for the VA in order to show your unemployability as a result of those conditions. Also related to Social Security information, the VA is going to want to know your work history. You are entitled to receive unemployability effective when you stopped working at the substantially gainful level. Now, that's a level that is predetermined in the regulations, and it's essentially as long as your earnings are under the poverty level. And when VA is looking for information about your employment on that 8940 application, they ask for you to identify your work history. If you provide them with your Social Security earnings records, which are something that you have access to through the Social Security's website, you will need to register for a login into your own into being able to access your own benefits. But once you've done that, you can go in and you can print out a copy of your Social Security earnings records, and you can provide that to the VA as proof of approximately when you stopped working or when you stopped working above that level that they consider to be substantially gainful employment. So often the VA is going to consider your claim for unemployability to start on the date that you file that VA form 8940. However, if prior to that you have had claims or appeals pending where you are looking for entitlement to service connection for conditions that limit your ability to work, or if you are looking for increased ratings on service connected conditions that limit your ability to work, your claim should go back to either as far back as when you filed those claims or when you stopped working. So that's why those earning records are going to be important in order to show when that time was. But also just so that you are aware that you may be entitled to benefits prior to when you actually filed that 8940. The last thing that I have to share as far as filing for unemployability is that in addition to that Social Security evidence that I was talking about earlier, so the Social Security earnings records and any information regarding Social Security disability that you may have been granted in the past, the other thing that you're going to want to try and provide if you can are statements from your doctors regarding the limitations that your service-connected disabilities cause for you. And by limitations, I'm specifically referring to limitations that would prevent you from being able to work. So limitations with sitting, standing, walking, using your hands for pushing, pulling, fine manipulation, all of the things that go along with working. In addition to physical limitations, we're looking for mental limitations and cognitive limitations as well. So the inability to pay attention and to pay attention or inability to maintain concentration. The need for breaks if your physical or mental condition are causing you the need to stop and take a break, things like that. So if you have a physician who would be willing to provide those limitations, that would be really helpful. The VA is going to send you for examinations and ask their doctors to provide some limitations. However, oftentimes those limitations are not sufficient in order to prove unemployability. So the more information that you can get from your doctors, the better. Additionally, if your doctor is willing to go on the record and say they believe that whatever your limitations are, either physical or mental, are causing you inability to work, that's very helpful as well. If your doctor won't go so far as to say that, then you can also take those limitations and they can be provided to a vocational expert. So an expert who has experience with understanding what the requirements are for working. And that's what we do, is we take those physical and mental limitations that are provided by doctors and we provide them to vocational experts who will provide an opinion and let us know whether or not those limitations are significant enough that you are incapable of working, or if they can't offer that opinion, one way or the other. But those limitations by your doctor are going to be what help to determine whether or not unemployability is available.